All right. That should be it. We should be live now. Let me refresh to make sure I didn't completely boomer it.
It shows live in the corner, so I think we're live.
Like the band Love, unfortunately.
Yeah,
That's who you should get called.
dude.
Except you're in way
No.
better shape than that guy ever was. Anyway, hello everyone. Welcome back to the Godful Universe Art Talk podcast, whatever we call this thing now, Josh, right?
Sure.
Two morons and a guest. Tonight we have Brad Kelly. He's an author. I have his book right here, House of Sleep, which I already recommend. And I've got a funny story about this book I'm going to jump into in just a second. He's also creator and host of, make sure I get it right, Method and Madness podcast.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All right. Which is criminally underrated.
Thank you.
Like it is. It blew my mind, man. I was same thing with the book. I'll go there in just a second. You also, and however far you want to go into this is up to you. You also created or co-founded the Art of Darkness podcast as well.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And funny story, we met on Twitter through a mutual acquaintance. I was at a horror convention. Let me say that again without the southern accent. A horror convention. And I met this guy named Brody. Came out of nowhere. He was kind of in the shadows. He came up and surprised me. He picked up our comic Apollyon 20XX, flipped through it, instantly got like 7 of the themes I didn't even know existed in it. He bought it. He went and read it, came back like an hour later, and we talked for about 2 hours or 3 hours about the esoteric nature of God and Gnosticism and conspiracy theories and everything. And then we started talking regularly every week, and he told me about you, Brad, and sang your praises. And I found you on Twitter, and I was like, as I was saying earlier in the back room, I was like, this is a person on Twitter whose stuff I actually like.
Well, I'll consider my Twitter career a success then, man, because it's tough to navigate those waters for sure. Yeah, and shout out to Brody, man. I love that dude. You know, I got to meet him in person. He's a smart guy, super friendly, just good dude all around. So
yeah, and a welder. He's more skilled than all of us.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, man. He's not out there just touching a computer. You know, he's actually doing work. So that's awesome.
Well, I meant what I said. I'm gonna start with this real quick. If you don't mind me just jumping into it, I don't like super long, thought out things. Your book, House of Sleep. I got this expecting, because I knew how many pages it was, and then I saw it was double spaced, and I was like, "Oh man, I can blow through a double spaced book, in like a couple of days." I have barely scratched the surface, and I'll tell you why. Because the second I started reading it, a few pages in, I got so inspired by what I could tell was like in it and what was the spirit behind it, so to speak, that I had to stop and digest it. And I actually started writing some stuff of my own again.
Excellent. Awesome. Yeah, man.
So I'm taking it very, very slowly. And it seems to me, I don't want to drag it out too much if you don't want to, but it seems to me that you are very careful with your words.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, that's like, yes, I am. I mean, you're looking at a book there that, and this isn't necessarily my argument for why it's good or any of that, but just sort of my process and my method, my approach. I mean, most of that's been edited 12 times, read aloud. My last phase is actually reading it aloud and recording it, and then I just listen to it over and over and over and over and over again to make sure it sounds and feels exactly the way I want. So yeah, I take the sentence very seriously. And I hope to avoid like purple. There's a limit to, you can get into sort of purple territory where it's obnoxious, and that's not the goal. It's to make it feel and sound a very, very particular way. So yeah, I appreciate that you've noticed that, because I do spend an inordinate, maybe too much time in that territory, trying to make it sure it all the sentences and all the words do exactly what I want them to do.
Well, the idea of reading it aloud and then listening to it again, that's really cool. I think more people should do that, because I mean, there's stuff that works on paper that definitely doesn't work once it's out in the wild. It doesn't sound like you thought it felt like it sounded. It's a cool
you'll always
approach,
catch
man.
stuff. You'll catch, even when you feel like it's perfect, you'll catch like little, that's where you get I refer to them as burrs, just little like that and is in the wrong place or something, just like small stuff that somehow. And I also notice when I'm reading it aloud, if I trip up on something, I mean, you're going to trip up on stuff here and there, but every once in a while, there'll be like, why couldn't I read that sentence smoothly? Well, it's because there's something wrong with it. It's mechanically weird. It's awkward.
Composition.
Yeah. So you fix that too.
It's the me of sentences.
Yeah, for sure.
I was laughing while you were saying your process, because all I could think was like, man, that's a great story idea of a guy that reading back his own work and it's different every time and he's driving him insane. Right? And he doesn't know what's going on. And
yeah, I could see that happening for sure. Version control, like nightmare. Yeah.
Well, the same thing with your podcast though. Like I find myself having to listen to it almost in like 20-minute intervals. And there's so much in it. And like one of them I was listening to, and you started, like, it was either yourself or the guest told a story. I think it was the guest about, you were talking about small towns and kind of like that high trust society, and someone's grandfather, I think, helped a policeman clear a room that didn't even need it. And I was like, man, that's a great beginning to like a horror movie.
Yeah. No, that was my my co-host. I used to do originally when the show started for the first, 4 months. It was the writer Aaron Gwynn was my co-host on that, and he just decided he didn't quite have time in in his world to be doing it. He's got a lot of irons in the fire, and I'm like, I get like my teeth on something, and I'm just 100%. So I think we weren't quite matching energy there, and just decided we'd split amicably rather than hating each other in 6 months. Well,
Josh and I are both so low energy diabetes that we get along.
Hey man, whatever works.
It's the grits and the biscuits.
It's got to be complimentary. It's just got to be complimentary. It doesn't matter what the style is, but you got to mesh. So.
Oh, he's never complimentary. But no, the reason I had you on was, first of all, to get to know you, because Twitter, you can DM someone, but that's just that's lame. It'd be better to write a purple prose letter and mail it to someone like in 1850. But I want people to check out your stuff. Obviously, I wouldn't promote anything I didn't believe in. Like Josh and I, that's just lame.
No, I appreciate that, man. No, and thanks for having me on. This is fun, dude. I love the whole podcast thing. It's great.
Well,
it's been an excuse to meet people too, like meeting you and other people I've had on as guests and stuff, and shows I've been on. It's a lot of fun, actually.
Josh is falling asleep.
Deep in thought.
Remember that low energy? Well, I didn't want. We talked about it in DMs. I didn't want to go through topics. I think that's lame. I'd rather just shoot it. But there is something I did want to bring up with you, and it's the main thing, and it's very big and open and vague, and maybe that's why it's fun, which is the de and remystification of the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I feel that's if I had to articulate it better, that's what I felt in your book, was not even an attempt, but a successful remystification of the world. And I felt that in the first chapter.
Thanks, man. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely a phenomena, and it's a phenomena that I'm interested in, and it's one that I've experienced like in the timeline of my own life, right? So you can see these things like the micro and the macro scale, and it's one of the things that art can do, is participate in the remystification. It can probably participate in the demystification too, honestly. But one thing it certainly can do is in sort of layman's terms, is just making things weird, is like the first step towards that, right? But yeah, no, amen, dude. That's like, to me, that's kind of my goal in most of the stuff I do, is some degree of remystification in my crude, limited perception of things, without trying to be preachy about any particular aspect of it or dogma or anything, but just try to bring, there's cringy ways to say it, sprinkle a little fairy dust into things, but like there's also, remystifying the mystical isn't easy all the time or pretty all the time. It can be ugly and scary too. So, I like all of that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I enjoy so much about art. And I think, like, Josh and I are both Christians, but I want to come from that perspective that you just mentioned. Like, I think the middle ground I can meet with everyone who's attempting that is who's trying to touch art, because I firmly believe art is the divine and the mundane meeting, and I think we can all meet there in agreement of, like, there's something beyond us and within us that has to touch. There's something about Prince's Purple Rain, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And whatever, I think that is important, and what really has kind of brought down, like, you kind of spoke of personal experience, the and remystification of the world. The demystification of the world, to me, was basically, you just, the time we grew up, our world has been demystified, and we did it to ourselves, whatever means or whatever. It's almost like a fairy tale that was forgotten. It's kind of like a never-ending story, that nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think a lot of that comes from, the corporatization of our society and the industrialization of our society. We got on this path as human beings, as nations. We get on this path. You watch it in every nation as they become more skyscrapers and more career focused and more industrious, all these things. Their myths have to be killed first. Like, Japan is a very interesting place to me. I love going to Japan, visiting Japan, and studying about Japan. And, like, that's really their story in a huge way, is they go from this place that's like, we're descended from gods and our emperor is a god, to, now their god is work and their god is career and technology and everything they can create. And, literally they had to kill their gods to build the world that they live in. And they threw away their identity in that process. And so we lose so much about what makes us human when we demystify the world around us. And we say everything has to be concrete, everything has to be steel, everything has to be something that's, degradable and digestible and packaged and sold. So much of the deeper mystery of the world gets pushed aside, and it can't be real, because if it's real, I have to think about it. I don't have time for that. So it's an interesting topic.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely speaking my language. And, it's interesting. It's because every little push in that direction is a decision that totally makes sense on its own terms, right? It's always like, it's always like a rational, it's a billion little rational decisions that each one of them kind of makes sense on its own. And it's really difficult. And this is, I think, one of, like, the challenges of, like, the modern person in the 21st century, is, like, picking out of all of these, like, where you stop, right? Because like, for me, like, and I don't want to get too bogged down into like an AI LLM conversation, but, like, to me, I hate that stuff, right? But, like, to somebody else, they might not really distinguish between, like, getting on a streaming thing using a computer and AI. But to me, those are very, very different things. And I mean, I could figure out a way to articulate exactly why, but we're all going to have to, like, find that point where we're like, nope, I'm not doing that. I'm not, my spreadsheet isn't going to have that many rows. I'm not, like, I'm going to leave some space so I don't become completely radically demystified. And, and you can find, I mean, it's interesting because there's a lot of, you can sort of warp any belief system to fall into sort of the spreadsheet thing, I think. I mean, I call it big spreadsheet, or the spreadsheetification of everything, because
that's one of my favorite of your memes, is the cat spraying the guy with the tumor, the Excel tumor.
That's right. Yeah. The spreadsheet is a computer virus that has leapt to the human brain, is, like, the way that I think about all of this. And you can have any belief system and still fall prey to that if you, because our language isn't precise enough. You can warp the interpretations and the meanings of everything until you just kind of fall for whatever. And that, to me, feels like one of the difficult things to navigate. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I like this spreadsheet idea as a framing device, because if you can quantify something, then deleting it is easy.
Right. Exactly.
And I think about stuff like the Western expansion. We go out west, and we take the land from these people, and they'll the Native Americans, they say, oh, this is sacred, this is holy, the spirits live here, and we say there's no spirits in that rock.
Right.
Well, there's them all there now.
But yeah,
Right.
exactly. It leads to, if we quantify it and say it's not real, then I can delete it.
Yep.
Mhm.
And does it matter if there is actually a sky spirit? Maybe they're not correct about the mystical myth that they have,
Right.
but there is something precious there. And
Mhm.
if deleting the myth or the belief system or the spirit, whatever you want to call it, the esoteric, whatever, deleting that and just discounting it altogether does lead to paving over that beautiful thing and making a parking lot. And,
yeah, absolutely.
I think the demystification always leads to a deconstruction of the thing. And it doesn't matter how much truth there is in that idea for me or for somebody else. There is power in the spirit of the thing.
Yeah. Well, that's an old idea. If I can string a couple of things together, I think it's an old Jewish idea, even before Christianity, of an idol was simply a thing that a spirit possessed. It was they would build totems or rocks, and it was that's not God. That is something that God personifies and and that when you destroy that totem, you're not destroying the God. It can come any other time, and it can possess any kind of idol. And that idea kind of kept going on, and it's the idea of when you destroy something that's sacred, the sacredness comes back. And I think Jung would go into a lot of that with the collective unconscious, and he kind of saw it as like kind of a negative, like mixing it with Freud of when you destroy something, repress something, it comes back in a different way or in a worse way in some ways.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think about that kind of a lot. Like what have we done? Like how have we shocked ourselves by trying to numb ourselves? Basically, it's I hate to use the term. This is what we have at demystification. It's almost more mythification. We've destroyed our myths, and I agree with Josh there. Is when something sacred is gone, I don't think it just affects the people who held it sacred. I think that we as a race, as a collective humans, something happens with. I think there's an aftershock, like kind of like a limb gets cut off or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, there's a part of us as spiritual beings, whether people believe they are or not. There's a part of us that atrophies when we disconnect from something larger than ourselves. And when you look at these, people will say that stuff is the old way of looking at things, this mystical mindset, all these things, that we're better off now without those things. But are we? Like, are our families healthier than they used to be? Are our bodies healthier than they used to be? Is our society healthier than it used to be? And the argument could be that regardless of whether those things are real and whether what people believe is true or not, there is some connection to a larger thing than you can see and understand and express in quantifiable terms. That connection of something bigger than you creates an accountability that breeds a positive mindset usually, or is capable of it. It can breed negative things too, but it can also bring a sense of unity and purpose that nothing else can. I know it brings more like unity and purpose than a cubicle job and staring at a computer all day. Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, absolutely. If you don't sort of believe that there is some higher assignation for you and your decision-making process, and then your narrow sort of self-interests, and then it becomes even worse, because I suppose if you didn't have something like that you felt a part of or responsible to, maybe you could your family unit, you could like get all your meaning there. And I think there's certainly value in the family unit, obviously, but now we're getting like more isolated, and people seem like there's sort of less, the family is even less important. And so now you get down to this, like, it's sort of Bugman style, where it's just like you're just left with yourself. And if you're the only thing that's important to you, then I mean, that's the end of you in a way, I think, because
there was value in the tribe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, there's value in being a part of a larger body than yourself, you know, and say what people may say, whatever they want about religion. And I know that people can get all bent out of shape about religion, but you know, you can't tell me that there's not benefit to being, you know, we call it a church family, but it's a tribe.
Yeah. Well, and that's an important thing. That's an important thing, I think, that that the world kind of needs to talk about, and is allow me to try to bridge a few things together.
Yeah.
And you just use the term bug man, which I think is a great term, but it's weird. I've lost friends over this. Like, we try not to really get political, because I think politics is downstream from philosophy and religion. And I think art surpasses those things. I think art, like I said, I think art is the divine made incarnate. So I think politics is a lesser philosophy, and we've kind of elevated it to where it shouldn't be, where we've made it a religion. But there's so many people that I think are trying to. There's an obsession, especially with, like, we've seen the left wing obsession, we've seen the right wing obsession. Now we're starting to see it, and it's always about controlling art or controlling the world politically. And that's where the idea of all art is political comes from. It's like, well, no, it's not. It's our art may be philosophical, and I would argue all art is philosophical or religious, but it's not political by nature. I say all that to say, one of the reasons I want to reach out with you and have this kind of conversation is because it's something that's been really destroying my brain. Is the separate? I think what troubles me about the world is people are trying to politicize art too much. And I don't care which side it is or what's come from. Like, art is something pure and sacred, and it's supposed to be something that's hard to understand, hard to grasp, and you are consistently chasing after it because it's true. It's good and true and beautiful, and we don't really know what those things mean until they are incarnated. And the second you try to impose basically politics into it, you taint it, I think.
I 100% agree with that. And especially because especially if you allow it to get sort of bogged down in sort of pedestrian everyday politics, we're not talking about sort of grand historical patterns of like, this is how humans are, but like sort of narrow propagandistic type
knee-jerk reactionary.
When you get into that territory, even if I agree with the artist's politics 90%, I have very little interest in that kind of work. I think, you know, it's funny, the whole all art is political. I love that you sort of position art upstream of that, because as an artist, that's totally what I believe. There is a way in which that statement is you can interpret that, and it's sort of correct. Like, there are implications, I suppose, you know, all the time. But I think my rejection of it largely is because when people say that, what they mean is all art is to be judged through my 2025 internet brained politics. And exactly. that's the primary layer of interpretation and application is through, you know, I've been warping my brain on Twitter for the last decade, and I have some weird idea of what the world is, and I call that political. And then I'm gonna look at some movie from the 70s through that lens and judge it. And it's just it becomes utterly bizarre. So that's why I reject that. It's because they're saying something more complicated and, to me, kind of perverse, the people that are saying that thing. Then, you know, if you want to have the conversation of like, you know, there are political implications to all pieces of art, I'm like, you know, okay, sure, I guess it's not a very meaningful statement, but it's sort of there. yeah, that's getting used as a cudgel to basically bring every art object into honestly a largely boring conversation for the most part, right? Like, yeah. I mean, I stray as far away from the political stuff as I can when I'm in actually producing work, but
Yeah.
you can't always avoid it. I mean, the stuff's kind of there, especially, I guess, especially if you were to live in a place where, I mean, we think the politics stuff is hanging over our head all day, but that's really because we're so plugged into it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
The day-to-day changes seem minimal, based on sort of what's going on in the political sphere. I don't know.
Oh, I agree. I think the term you use, unplug, is a big thing. I think I mean, this an old internet joke is go touch grass, but it's the best advice in the world. It's like modern man doesn't go out and live under the sun and the stars anymore.
Mm-mm.
I mean, when's the last time anyone took a nap during the daytime outside, like a hobbit,
Right.
And that's a great, wonderful thing to do. It's awesome. You got a hammock, like
that's something that even like if my wife or anyone else is messaging me and they're anxious and they're stressed and they're having a bad day, and then I always tell them, like, go let the sun hit you, go get some air, get sunlight, not artificial light, go get actual sunlight, sit outside for a few minutes, like, and it always makes you feel better.
Oh, and it talk about remystification. So I'm fortunate enough to, my wife and I find ourselves in this position where I live in Metro Detroit in the suburbs, but we have some property in northern Michigan, not too far from Sleeping Bear Sand Dunes, which is this great national park. And we've got a little cabin, very off grid. We don't have electricity. We got to bring water with us and all this, but we got like a roof over our head and a bed to sleep on up there. And my wife and I will spend time up there together. But I get to, a couple times a year, I go up there by myself for a week or as long as I can get away with other obligations. And it's amazing. I wake up in the morning, I write for a couple hours, and then I go cut trail and clear brush and like just be out in the woods. I'm working, building up a sweat, but I'm out in the trees. And then, I come back and I grill a big old piece of meat and I build a fire and I hang out with my dogs and I smoke a cigar and I read a book. And it's like, and it's interesting because in one way it's just sort of relaxing, but I'll tell you what, like in terms of remystification, I don't mean this literally, but I sort of do. The trees start talking to you. Like the environment you start living in the environment in a different way pretty quickly. Time starts to move a little bit differently. Your physical body, your energy levels are a little bit different. You just start actually living in the world in a way slightly closer to, something sort of pre-modern. And I think being able to do that every once in a while at some scale is like the only way to psychically survive all of this.
Hey, it cleanses the palate, man. Yeah,
it really does. Yeah.
Well, and that's something I'd like to touch on. Like, I know we've kind of beaten up the modern world a little bit, and that's easy to do because it kind of sucks. But
it does. There's great things about it too, to be honest. You can get dental work, all that stuff.
I'm sitting in air conditioning. I'm not in the UK right now.
Yeah, it's 100 degrees where I'm at right now, and I'm wearing a long sleeve shirt. It doesn't even make sense. So yeah.
Well,
there's a lot of reasons to be glad we're not in the UK right now.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not. I don't like I say this so much, like because I see it so much. I always go searching for art and answers to questions and things, and I usually end up disappointed. It's I don't like the return with a V idea. Like, I'm not into old world blood and paganry and that kind of stuff, and I'm not a trad cath. I don't think, well, not that I don't think you said you can't go back. You can only go forward. But I think that's what I'm hoping for. The world is not like a change, but like some kind of path forward that integrates the new with what we know is eternal. And I don't like to say the old. I don't like to say the past. I like to say the eternal, because at some point in the past that was someone's present, and they thought it sucked probably. Like I'm sure like Warsaw 1938 sucked, you know, like it was worse than now. But they persevered, and I think that's the goal, is not like a worldwide changing of ideas or a zeitgeist, but just the little things, like little connections with people, and the discussions of art and the creation of art. I really do think art is important. Like that's why we do this and why I wanted to speak with you. I really 100% do think that incarnation of the divine is what people need, including myself.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And you're right. There is no return. I mean, I'm very interested in the idea that Terence McKenna referred to as the archaic revival, which is like you're basically you're not taking things back, but you're going back to find things of value and figuring out ways to sort of bring them forward, right? And I think that's kind of the key. And there's also, you know, as things sort of rapidly, quote unquote, progress or develop technologically, I think one thing is, and it isn't a return, but it's thinking about how you can sort of pick and choose your way through this landscape, right? And decide which things, because here's the thing, like every time you make a decision to, you know, purchase something or integrate a new technology into your life that makes your life easier, that's a reasonable decision to make, every single one of those. But every time you do it, you're giving something else up, even if you don't know what that thing is. And so some of that stuff is worth giving up. I'm glad I don't have to wash clothes by hand anymore. But do I want the computer writing a letter to a friend of mine? You know, no, I don't. Do I want them taking over for my artistic endeavors? No, I don't. So every time one of these things comes up, I think the wise thing to do is just carefully evaluate, like, okay, what do I have to give up in order to bring this into my life and make my life, quote unquote, simpler? Because I think, like in Nicklandian terms, all of this is pushing us to all of this is pushing us to have the shortest decision space possible. And again, every one of them makes sense in a rational sense, but like you're gonna give stuff up, and you just have to I think pick your own coordinate on this and like what you're gonna give up. And yeah, find ways to sort of reconnect, however that works. And art is definitely, I mean, I love what you're saying, Dan. I think all art is actually just about God, one way or another. Even the most atheistic stuff is like a sort of searching for God. You know, I just did a big read of some Don DeLillo work, and he's I don't know exactly what his religious views are because he's a pretty reclusive person, but he strikes one as a somewhat atheistic kind of coastal elite type guy. He's also a genius, but that's sort of kind of seems like his worldview. But you read his stuff, and if you read between the lines, he's constantly looking for some access point to like the invisible realm outside of things. He's always seems to be looking for it. I'm not even sure if he knows that's what he's looking for. And so I ultimately think that's what all art is sort of about in some way or another.
Oh, I 100% agree. I try not to delve into that too much if I'm not sure of anyone's religious standing. But no, I believe an easy way to articulate my thought is like almost like the Tolkien and Lewis true myth. I do believe that. I do believe that all myths point to God ultimately, and I do think that truth appears in anyone, anywhere, anytime it so wishes, in any way. And I think, and that's what I find so interesting about art is it's so. I mean, this is very recently, and I kind of got into it on Twitter a little bit. And I think you sound worse on Twitter than you mean.
Yeah,
like you can say something in a sentence or two, and you go back an hour later, you're like, man, that probably sounded harsher than I meant to.
I probably once a week, I'm like, man, that's kind of a jerk.
99% of the time, I said exactly what I meant to say.
Amen. Yeah.
But all that to say, like, I really started thinking about subjective versus objectivity in art, and I've come to the conclusion that art is objective. How we react to art is subjective.
Yeah.
How art hits you is subjective, but it doesn't make sense for art to be subjective. That would mean every word that defines it, that we understand, every idea we have of it is subjective, and then every idea of those, every word of those, and it's infinite until it's the end of 1984, where everything is just power. Because not subjectivity, but subjectivism just leads to the postmodern power games that we have and we see. And I say all that to say that it makes you we've kind of been in this bubble of thinking that if something is objective instead of subjective, that means it's simpler and easier to understand. And it's like, no, if art is objective, that means you've got to figure out what it is. You have to define it, and it's impossible.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's like nature's also objective.
Yeah.
I no, we don't really understand that either, right? So yeah, no, I understand. I see what you're saying. I think it's whenever I come across those binaries, I sort of assume that there's like, I do think that art is largely objective for sure. And maybe I don't like either term exactly, because there is like a taste thing, right? That is difficult to account for. And there are works of art that I can respect the skill and I can see what they're doing, but for whatever reason, it doesn't give me the feeling that I'm looking for, you know? Yeah. And so that's the part where I'm sort of like, I don't know what that is. Is that a failing? Why
do you hate Taylor Swift, Brad?
Yeah, right.
Plot twist: he's a Swiftie.
Yeah, I am her biggest stan for sure. No, I don't even know a Taylor Swift song. I feel like I should, but I never got into it.
No, you're okay.
But you know what I mean? It's like, it's like, she might be brilliant, but like the music is a great one, because there's a lot of music out there that I know is like good. And they're certainly talented musicians, but it just doesn't hit me, you know?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure what to make about those, like what to do with those distinctions, because I mean, writing's the same way. There's stuff that I know, like, I tell you what, I know John Updike is good. I don't care if I ever read anything else by John Updike ever again. I
hate Steinbeck. I understand.
Yeah, I love Steinbeck.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
A massive collection of Steinbecks. I hate Dickens.
That's the only way to have a collection of Steinbeck. All his books are massive, and they're terribly boring.
No, they're not. No, they're not. Dan.
I picked up Grapes of Wrath, and like he described a dust field for like 3 pages, like that.
And it was beautiful, Dan.
Yeah,
you could smell it.
No, I completely agree with that. I guess what I'm trying to say is this is another thing too. I like to bridge the gap between physics and art. I think everything is the same thing at the end of the day. I think that's the great unifying theory of our soul we're trying to figure out. But there's this idea in physics that light changes when it's observed. And I sometimes think about the same thing with I wonder if the universe in general is like this, and art. And I wonder if we're something like centuries of the truth, and we hold the universe together objectively, subjectively, if that makes sense. Is if we are participants in creation, maybe imperfect ones. I mean, and that gets into different religious theology, of course. But I don't think that we're meat and robots. And I think I don't think anyone can be an artist and believe and think that. I'm not belittling them, as I don't think that if you don't open yourself up the slightest bit to something other than just materialism, I don't think that you can live as a human being.
No, I think that's I think that's maybe not the full story, but I think that's part and parcel of like the sort of creeping nihilism and anxiety and depression and all of that stuff. I think that's part of it, is not being open to that stuff, because you constantly have to, like, it's real difficult to like articulate a durable meaning for your life if you're just in the spreadsheet, right? It's very difficult to come up with anything that doesn't sort of match the language of like a return on investment paradigm or something. And that always feels sort of callous. And because ultimately, like it's funny because if you kind of think about it, it's like the most meaningful stuff in life that you'll experience in your life is sort of extra rational in a way, like, creative, especially if you're a creative person. Like there's no good reason on an individual basis to spend your time making a comic book. right?
Yeah.
Like from a rational standpoint, there's no good argument for it. What would
Josh
you
cries and leaves.
Yeah. No, trust me. I've spent more time. I've quote unquote wasted more time, as much time as anybody, you know. But it doesn't make sense in big spreadsheet. It doesn't make any sense to do these things because you can't. How do you can't really win. It seems increasingly difficult to make a career, make a living or a career out of it. So there's a really, and I kind of think that to sort of survive this next era that we're entering, it's like you're gonna have to, like, to psychically survive, you're gonna have to believe some kind of weird stuff, and you're gonna have to do some kind of weird stuff, because that's the only way you're gonna retain your humanity. Because otherwise, everything's just it's just a rational calculation, right? So, and I don't mean weird in terms of like. I just mean
weird in the original sense of the word.
Right. I just mean sort of like idiosyncratic, like your own kind of thing, right? And it doesn't even have to have like cosmic significance. It can just be, some narrative. I don't buy that, like something that separates you from other people, so you can remain
He's
an
a flat
individual.
earther, Dan.
Yeah.
Brad, have you seen Evangelion?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because we're talking Human Instrumentality Project.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Right. That's right. That's probably seeped in my subconscious and coming back out.
The film End of Evangelion is my favorite piece of artwork ever, and I was able to see it in theaters last year, and it changed everything.
Nice,
all that to say, no, when AI art came out a couple of years ago and it was all crappy, and it's still crappy, but it was really bad. I mean, that's the ideas that hit me. I was like, this is going to push almost every single person into admitting I've got to figure out what a human is.
Yes,
because
that might be the upside. That might be the long-term upside of the whole thing. Actually,
it's confrontational. It is. Well, are we meat that computers that just absorb and reconfigure and spit out, or are we somehow above that? I mean, and we could go into flowery language of how that's different, but just that question of something above that, or not maybe not even above, something different than that. And that's where I'm trying to change my language personally to speak with people. Like I said, I come from a religious perspective, but we're in a post-religious world. And that's where you and I are discussing, and Josh and you and I are discussing, we're in a post-spiritual, post-purpose world.
Yeah.
And to me, that's almost that's a terrible thing, but at least there's a level playing field of these words and these ideas we can discuss together instead of retreating into dogma.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, it's interesting. I don't identify I was raised Catholic. I mean, I don't.
I'm sorry.
Nowadays, I don't. Nowadays, I personally identify as a Christian, but it's interesting because I actually, whatever it is, however it is, I see the world. I seem like almost more comfortable with people who are Christian than like out and out atheists, for sure. Because I guess I'm in the midst of this remystification process, and so I just find more common ground with people who at least think there's something outside of their head. You know what I mean? Like, and I agree with. You're sort of talking about we can't return. I mean, I've sort of seen the sort of modern era that I've lived through in my personal experiences. You know, you rent a car and you drive over those spikes and you can't go backwards.
Yeah. I
feel like that has kind of happened to me with a lot of things, unfortunately. Like I almost wish I could go back, and yet somewhere rattling around, I just can't. I can't put it in reverse for some reason. And so I've had to like find other way. I feel like I'm finding another way to come all the way back around, and maybe I'm just not there yet. Yeah.
You cannot redo, to quote Evangelion.
Yeah.
It is in your brain.
Yeah.
One of the things that I love about Old Testament scripture is how frequently, because God, at least the God of the biblical narrative, he knows the limitations of human beings. I mean, scripture tells us he knows our frame, Like he knows what we can and can't do. He knows where our flaws are, and he knows how forgetful his people are. He knows how quick we are to become as materialistic as possible. And so there's so many places throughout the Old Testament where God says, okay, I want you to, like, even when they're crossing the Red Sea and they're, he says, pick up rocks as you're going from out of this riverbed. So when you get to the other side, you can build something that you can come back to and look at and bring your kids to, and they can look at it. Something tangible that you can put your hand on. And, I think about Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim before they go into the promised land. Joshua brings the people out and they're between these two mountains, and one's literally the mountain of blessing and the other one's the mountain of curses. And they read the entirety of the law, and God says, all right, this direction here is how you can go, and I'll bless you. This is the direction that you can go, and this is the curses, this is the consequences you can expect. And Joshua says famously, choose this day whom you will serve. And God tells him to build an altar, and it's interesting that he builds that altar on the mountain of curse, not the mount of blessing, because generations and generations and generations after that, God wanted Israelites to come back, to be able to come back and stand on that physical spot and look at that altar and say, there was a time when we stood here and we made a choice, and these were my two choices. And, I think that there's something that's lost for us as human beings when we don't have anything tangible to tether to come back to. Like you say, it's like, it's hard to come back. It's really hard to come back if there's nothing to come back to.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
But if you can come back to something that's concrete and it's a connection where you can say, I encountered the divine here.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I took a bunch of turns getting to where I'm at now, but I can come back to this place where I sat a stone up, and this represents a time in my life that I was connected to something bigger. And for a lot of human beings, laying aside all the religion and all the other stuff, the last time that most people had any connection whatsoever with a sense of wonder was when they were children.
Yeah.
Right.
And then we wonder why we're anxious and depressed and angry all the time and unfulfilled. We haven't experienced anything wonderful since we were kids. And that's why nostalgia is such a big moneymaker for us, is because we want to hold something that made us feel good.
Yeah, no, that's beautifully put. And I love all that. That's amazing. Yeah. No, you're right on the nostalgia too. That's exactly and there's no shade on it, but and I have my own nostalgic sort of tendencies, and I think everybody's are a little bit different or whatever. But there is some of that. Yeah, you're trying to look for that feeling when things felt special somehow, because it's hard to find.
I mean, it's such a weird thing, and this is just such a small thing. I saw on an Instagram post last night, and I saved it just because it hit me weird. Like, somebody posted a picture of a brand of cookie that I forgot existed.
Yeah.
Forgot they existed. And just seeing the picture of that brand of cookie, all of a sudden, like it hit me like something that I haven't felt in a long time.
That's the diabetes.
Stupid. Yeah, it is. I felt it in my arteries, but not it was I had a really strong reaction to seeing that. I was like, man, it's like it unlocked a piece of something that I hadn't connected to in a long time. And I know that we can't go back and be children, although some people try to. Some people live as though they're still children, but I do think there's something to be said for, and Dan and I have talked about this a lot. When we do create the comic books or the novels or whatever it is we're working on in our universe, I want to create the type of thing that becomes a standing stone for a new generation. I want to create something that has the weight and the just tangible influence and impact in another person's life that Akira had in mind.
Yeah.
Or that Dune had. You're like, I want to create something that takes a kid or anybody. It doesn't have to be a kid, but that's what, where my mind goes. But some 13-year-old kid reads Apollyon, and hopefully it opens up something in them that they never are able to disconnect from.
Oh, and amen. I mean, that's what you're trying to do. I mean, I think that's what you're trying to do with art, right? It's like
that's what it should be.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's like I found this channel and I want to get you on, like I want to share it with you, I want
and that's why I don't mind going to bat with jackasses on Twitter who say that it's titty books are art, or that smut is art, or that comics it's just about making money. Like if that's how shallow you are welcome to be that. But I will tell you that you suck for it.
Yeah, man, get them.
It can and should be more. You have a responsibility to be more than just garbage that people eat and then out.
It is, if you're just kind of appealing to sort of the basest instincts, I don't really have a ton of time for that either.
Well, then they're always, I made a lot more money. I bet you did. It's easy to sell smut. People do love a good cheeseburger.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
Well, and with what you just said, Josh, like nostalgia and childhood, this is something I've been thinking about a lot, and I wanted to speak to shout out to you, Brad. It was we got into it briefly, both of us a little bit with I don't know who the person was. I would assume some kind of feminist person. It was on that tweet I did that went way too far than it should have. Talking basically, was talking about a specific event in my life where kind of realized that as a man you have to prioritize your responsibilities over your immediate emotions.
Yeah.
And that's it. Sometimes men have to prioritize their responsibilities over their immediate emotions. That's all I meant to say.
Sure.
But with all that, like, again, my brain tries to pull different things all together all the time. I don't like using this term, but I'm going to have to. I think the integrated man is something like that. Is you still have a childlike wonder. You do seek to be awed, and that comes from humility, and that's the hardest thing for any man to have to do, is to be humble. And as you were describing, being in the woods, the tree starts speaking to you. And almost every religion, at least the Abrahamic religion, places man above nature. But that doesn't mean you dominate and subjugate it. It means you are in communion with it. And
you're responsible to it to a certain degree. Yeah.
Well, that's what a good king is. If we have to get that kind of archetype, and that's another thing I think that our world kind of desperately needs. And I'm not a monarchist, but I mean, I don't remember the last time we had any kind of leader that was worthy of respect by any means ever in the world in my lifetime.
Right.
All that to say, I think a lot of questions of where we are, we have to answer there's so many things that have to be redefined. And I think man is one of them. And as an artist, I 100% believe that you have to be open to like the female side of things, the muse, as they used to call it. I don't think, and that's my problem with it. Like, I have problems with the left wing side of things. My problem with the right wing side, I think a big one is their weird fascination with masculinity, as they think it is. And it doesn't seem like this integrated man idea that can understand childlike wonder and can understand female tenderness and chaos and inspiration, the beautiful sides of those things, and also integrate it responsibly. Because that's what, to me, it seems art is. Art is being able to responsibly descend into the unknown, realize it's beautiful, and return.
Amen. Yeah.
I don't know where I was going with that.
No, I'm glad to get into this area because it's very much like an area of interest for me. There is the sort of like the hyper masculine stuff. I mean, I think a lot of that comes from being there has been a certain degree of like persecution, at least in like the public square of masculinity, and so it kind of backlashes in a sort of cartoonish form. You know, it kind of comes back sort of mutated, and that's how you get like an Andrew Tate type guy and other things.
Any other time in human history, we would not have called a man; we would have called a brute.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so that's the thing, is it's like they're not allowed to, you know, you're not allowed to have the masculinity writ large gets kind of demonized. And I think that's changing, but that happened certainly in my lifetime. And so yeah, what shows up, it gets sublimated into this like weird, like guys got to wear tactical and drive Ford Super Duties, you know, to their.
I took a Super Duty before this podcast.
Yeah,
because you had a cheeseburger, you did it to yourself.
Right.
I had brisket, man.
But you know, it's like that's another thing where it's like we got to like sort of as men, I feel like we're kind of reselecting and refiguring out like what the coordinates of all this are, because I think you're totally right. I think the artistic enterprise does require, maybe not require, for me it has traits that are more commonly associated, are sort of more feminine, to be perfectly honest. I mean, you get into sort of like psychological.
You do have nice tits.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You should see me in heels, man. But you know, there's psychological tendencies that tend to be masculine and feminine, and you know, in some ways I score a little bit more on the feminine side, to be honest. Like interest in people versus things, I'm slightly more interested in people than things, to be honest. I'm not uninterested in things. I have an engineering degree, for crying out loud, so I'm not like that, you know, much in that direction. But you know, other things like neurotic. I mean, I've gotten over a lot of it, but I'm neurotic as hell, to be honest with you. And that's more of that's, you know, default. That's my mode. That's more of a, generally in psychological terms, that's more of a feminine trait. So, but that doesn't mean, I think that's another thing we've sort of experienced now, is it's like, well, you get two options. You either get to be super feminine or super masculine, and there's no gray. If you start to even lean more in the other direction, then you probably need to go to get surgery done to like fully go in that direction, right? It's like,
well, but that's
you know,
that's
extremes.
an interesting. It's such an interesting thing that, and you know, we've talked about this before. You know, this idea and all the gender dysphoria conversation these past few years has muddied this up so much.
Oh yeah.
And so, you know, like you said, it's so intensified it to like, well, you need to transition and all. But you know, it used to be that we understood, at least for girls, we understood that there was a spectrum, because girls could be tomboys,
right?
And it was fine. It was cute. Yeah, we all grew up with some of those girls that we probably had crushes on, but they were better at baseball than any other guys. And you know, and then they were allowed to be tomboys. And usually, like as they grew up, maybe they were never like the girliest girl ever, but they usually settled into, you know, who they were, their identity, and they were fine. But for guys, if a boy showed any sign of,
I've still got bruises.
of like, if you looked at something that wasn't a mask, like if Dan's like, Dad, I want to buy an X-Men figure. Yeah, that's awesome. I think I want Storm. Are you kidding me?
Storm
you
gets
want
a
a
pass.
Jean Grey figure? But like we got, it got beat out of you, sort of.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that pushed some people as way further than they would have gone. Or it just made other people completely uncomfortable with anything that didn't fit right inside that margin. Right. And we look at the great men of history, and they were men who were sensitive, men who could go to war and weep.
Yeah.
You know, they were. You know, you look at David. David can cut the head off of a giant and kill an entire city, and then go write songs about it on his harp.
Yeah.
You know, like
and lament.
And there's a complexity to masculinity that was lost when we shoved it into this, like this one little piece of it is okay, and anything in between is not okay. It's not healthy.
This is what big spreadsheet does, man.
Yeah, it's not healthy. It's not quantifiable. So you better delete it and delete it now.
Yeah. And and you're right. There used to be like different versions of this. Like I had a dream last night about an episode of MacGyver, right? And this is stupid, but I'm gonna like wrap this back around. So while I was doing some work stuff that didn't require a lot of cognitive attention, I threw some MacGyver on in the background just because I was like, that nostalgia. I used to watch that show when I was a kid. And I kind of realized I had this realization. I was like, this is a really interesting vision of a man, super capable, right? Like incredibly competent, and yet like not violent, not a brute or brawny in any way, but like problem solver, actually tough, and like legitimately like can put up with some crap. Brave,
great hair,
amazing hair. I'm super envious of that. But yeah, it was like that's what's unmanly about MacGyver? You know what I mean? Just as an example. And I think there used to be more of these kind of figures. And I think you're totally right. I think we've sort of like, you shunt everybody into far to one extreme or the other. And then you get this like schizophrenia in the middle where nobody knows if you're even slightly more toward the middle. It's like, what the hell am I even? Yeah.
Well, that's another reason I wanted to speak with you, especially your podcast. Like, and I believe it was the same episode, and I don't know why that one stuck with me so much, but I think you guys kind of talked about very briefly about masculinity, or at least maybe old men. And that's the thing is, we have our mutual friend, or at least mutual acquaintance, Brody, and I'm going to pick on him because he's not here, and he's going to listen to this at work tomorrow. He said, but he's a I must use I don't mean it derogatorily, just because I'm old. But he's a kid that is in his 20s. That's a welder and super smart, and also an artist. And I think we don't understand that, especially, I hate to use the term, but coastal elites, especially the flyover states. I mean, you'll go anywhere, any state, any place, any small town, you'll find a guy that is a plumber that knows Roman history and loves Rush and Yes. And like on a spreadsheet, that doesn't make sense. And like, this guy may not have studied poetry, but he loves it. And he may not have studied history, but he loves it. And he knows it. And he can calculate physics instinctually in his head that he may not even understand when he installs a pipe. And it's like, people are very complex. And
well, I mean,
they're messy.
To go back to the Japan thing, you think if we look at samurai and the caricature of the samurai that we see in movies now that's so over stylized, but those men, they were incredibly bloodthirsty fighters, but they were poets, and they did flower arrangements. And like they loved and celebrated beauty and balance and patience, and like it's something that there was a holistic man. Good word, and that's not what we see anymore.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. And and this is part of in my sort of podcasting endeavors. Part of my I always try to have like a goal in the things that I'm doing, right? And overall, like, what is the best possible thing that effect this could have? And part of it is like, I want to make it because there's this notion that men don't read, and this is it's not true. It's an exaggeration, but it is true that a smaller proportion of the male population reads than women. That does seem to be true. And a lot of guys that I know in my real life who do read, they would never read fiction, right? To them, it's nonsense or whatever. So like trying to create like a little space where it's kind of cool, maybe, right? Like maybe some dude could come across and be like, that's actually seems pretty interesting to me. And they feel like they've got a space where they're allowed to do it, right? To maybe I will pick up some weird novel, and maybe I don't have to. Maybe I got my my boomer dad's voice in my head telling me it makes me gay or something, but it doesn't. I'm you know what I mean? Like,
oh, you want to be a space wizard with a laser sword?
Right. Plot twist: bread makes everyone gay. You're getting the most heartfelt letters. You made me realize who I am.
I guess if that's the effect. I don't know, man. It wasn't what I intended. There's unintended consequences sometimes. Yeah.
It's the same consequences of a David Bowie concert.
Yeah, it's right. It's right. I didn't think I was going to get aroused, but yeah.
But how could I not?
Depends on if he was in his Nazi phase or not.
Fair enough.
People forgot that when the Kanye dropped. I was like, man, you know, Bowie went through that too, right?
Yeah, we've been there. Yeah, we've been here. There's nothing new under the sun, man. Yeah. That's hilarious.
No, I do think exploration and questions, and I think we've kind of I think people are more curious than they let on. Like, I don't think the internet will have you dooming about everything. It'll post some stupid video of a 12-year-old who can't read and be like, the kids are cooked, and it's like, no, the average person is fine. Like, the extremes you see, it's ridiculous. Like, the whole point is that we used to know that if it bleeds, it leads. Just if you see something, that means it's the exception. If it was, if it was not the exception, it wouldn't be up there. I think we've changed what the exceptional is. The exceptional was beautiful, was life-giving and cool, and now, or at least it was like a guy fighting a bull. Yeah,
something. It had an intensity to it, right?
Yeah,
it felt like it. Yeah.
And now it's, you know, the worst person you've ever seen talking loudly into a microphone.
Someone tweeting the bull.
Yeah,
exactly. Explaining to you, actually, did you know that bulls? So blah 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 blah. Yeah.
Old school is fun. Like, what's fun and sad is you can pick out who the bots are now by how they comment on something, and you're like, here's a long paragraph basically explaining the thing, and you're like, okay. Thanks, Rashid. I know you're a bot now.
Yeah, it's difficult to know. It's interesting. I've been on Twitter enough now that, like, I have mutual people like you that I see on a regular basis, and that's kind of cool because at least I know that they're human beings. And
you see them have a bad day, and they're like,
exactly. You know, normally they tweet this, and then they show up one day, and clearly it's not. You know, something's off. Yeah, it's no replacement for real life relationships, obviously, and it's not the role that it plays in my life, but there is like a human side to all of that. And I try to lean into that as much as I can, you know, like try to make some actual personal connections and try to try to remember that there's a human being sometimes on the other side, but it doesn't. Sometimes when people the other thing is there are plenty of people who act like the way that they act, they might as well be bots, and that stuff is always frustrating as well.
Actually, I had that encounter yesterday on Twitter with something. I wasn't trying to be mean, but talking like, I can't tell if you're a bot or not. Like, your profile started in March of this year, and all it does is repost one thing. It's like I can't tell, and like I'm not smart enough to know if you're a bot.
You should have sent them the little CAPTCHA thing. Are you a robot?
Right. That's pretty good. Yeah.
How many of these boxes are a bicycle?
But that's the beauty of art. Is like, the thing is, like, even when you're feeling like old in your soul and you feel like there's nothing new, and I forgot who said it. I don't know if it was Roger Scruton or whoever it was, but he said, like, if you want a new idea, read an old book.
Yeah.
And that is the beauty, I think, of an artistic endeavor, of a painting even, or something like that, is you see it and it does feel like, I'm gonna use the term eternity, like, opens up. It does feel like, oh, you're not old anymore. It does feel like the world's not dead. And the beauty of that is those things exist. There's millions of those experiences. It's just it's easy to get lost in the mundanity, if that's a word.
Yeah. No, they're absolutely right. I mean, that's part of that's another part of the whole podcasting effort that I think I'm trying to do too, is sort of like, you know, hit some classic stuff that people are familiar with. But we just did, it's still behind the paywall, and I'm working on part 2 of it. But, you know, we were just talking about, with Jack BC from the Book Club from Hell, we were talking about this book, The Plains by Gerald Murnane. That book is brilliant. I've never read anything like it. It's so weird. It's super, like, highly readable. It's so smart and insightful and unpredictable.
And I hate him.
kind of.
Yeah.
That's when you know it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You're like, yeah, when I have that reaction, and that is a book, it's somewhere along the line, it's like, you son of a.
Yeah, there's enough jealousy to make you like,
oh, he did it. He did what I could never do.
Right. But I'm hoping, like, I want, if some people pick that up that wouldn't have otherwise picked it up, I'll be so happy,
yeah,
because
there's something about
40-year-old
sharing
book,
something
and
good.
it's so weird. Yeah.
40-year-old book, like 1980.
Yeah, it is. It's 1982. Yeah.
Ow.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right, my old.
The first Van Halen record is older than that.
Yeah. No, it came out the year I was born. Yeah. So,
oh, nice.
I'm in my 40s. So
Okay,
the 80s are now like interesting territory to me, because it's like I was there, but I wasn't really there. You know what I mean? In terms of consciousness, I don't remember any of it hardly. So
just the nicotine.
Just the nicotine.
It's
Yeah,
still in you.
for sure.
Josh, you're 40 now, aren't you? 41?
41. About to be
Yep,
42 in September.
I'll be 39 this year, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna try not to break anything.
Yeah, oh no, it'll happen for sure.
Break it, you balled it, man.
Yeah, now there's like, it's weird because stuff will happen to you physically, and then you're just like, well, I guess it's just like that now.
That's like Louis C.K. talking about going to the doctor after like 35. He's like, and so like, what are we gonna do about this?
Yeah.
He's like, well, here's some medicine. You're gonna take these pills every day. He's like, and then it'll get better. He's like, no, that's just something you do now. It's not gonna get better.
Exactly. No.
It's just been added to your resume.
Master Swag King said, "Make boob books,
We should do that.
please."
Just for you. Just
think-
for you, man.
MSK, I think there's enough on the market. I think you'll be all right.
Yeah, you don't have to.
Let me know when you reach the end of pornography on the internet.
Yeah, that's the good thing. That's the thing. If you're into smut and they stop making it, how long would it take you to even notice? You know,
Master Swag, he's great. He's had me on before. He's a funny guy.
Yeah.
That is funny. Like that's like a sci-fi thing. The man who ended the internet or something. He saw the end of it.
Right.
It's taken me 14,000 years. He says prawn is life. I can control it. I don't think you can.
It controls you.
But no, I really like that. I really like that idea of the Excel brain you're talking about, and that is, I'm sure you're aware of Lewis, Abolition of Man, and that hideous strength. And his whole thesis is men without chests, and it wasn't the barbarian or hyper masculine idea. It was men without emotion, men without heart, replaced by. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's been a long time. It was the villain in not the villain, but the great work in that hideous strength. It's a disembodied head, isn't it?
I never actually read
series
that,
in a long time.
I believe it's a disembodied head that is like demon possessed, that they're getting their information from. And of course, the whole thing is like it's the rational taking over the emotional, and it's being possessed by basically a demonic force that aligns with that idea. And that's a whole thing too, like that mechanical view of humanity's existence, like since the beginning of time, through the myths, like Tower of Babel. Even this, I forgot who did it. Someone did a breakdown on like the Antichrist idea of the 666 and how that number actually appears numerous times. It's usually when there's a census. It's always when there's when you're trying to Excel brain things. Actually, it's when you're trying to close the circle. That number and that idea always exists. And I thought that was interesting. And I think even Tolkien went into some of that with when he described Saruman as having a mind of metal now, and industrialization. And I just, this is the thing is when you read those books, like especially before World War I and World War II, people saw what was coming. Yeah, they saw this idea of humankind separating from the soul, separating from the heart, and just becoming strictly Excel brained.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there was real concern about that. I think there's I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Ernst Jünger.
I know that name. Yes.
Yeah,
I think I have him on a list to read.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend dipping your toes into it at least. But he was, I think he was one of the people, and he, I suppose he probably better articulated it a little later than the period you're talking about. But I mean, his sort of coming into prominence was as a soldier in World War I, but he lived to be like 104 years old or something.
Oh, that poor soul.
You know what I mean? He's like a world. He's like a World War I soldier who also probably like saw a sitcom. You know what I mean? It's just a weird, it's a weird way to. It's hard to get it into your head. But he's definitely saw the sort of the machine age coming, and was sort of haunted by it to a certain extent. Although he had way too much swagger to ever be like emotionally affected by anything like that. But yeah, there was definitely people who like saw this coming, who saw the like, and he saw it in World War I because he was and he also served in World War II. He sort of saw there's like an old vision of war, horses, right? And like did have a little bit of romance to it, I suppose. Or it could. And then saw that turn into mechanized warfare, which was like, oh, this is not
dehumanization.
Yeah, anything that was conceivably romantic or human about warfare and combat and battle was just gone. And I think that process has basically hit not everything, but a lot of things.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I've had that discussion with Josh in his house before. Is like thinking, you try to rationalize how human beings were and societies were back then, and you think about war in particular, and you're like, was it really just cynical? Like you have to convince men to go to war, basically. So you make up glory, you make up story, you make up Valhalla. It's like, no, I don't think that's what it was. It's like, it seems when you read this thing, especially tribal warfare, and this is something the Native Americans, to their discredit, there was a problem with tribal warfare. Was you go and you fight, and if like 10 guys die, you retreat,
right?
Like, because you don't have that many men,
right?
And that's one reason, again, like the Native Americans lost. They never met a mechanized force of a line of men that could shoot volleys over and over and over again. Right. But there's something about that idea of like glory and defending your homeland and that kind of stuff. And once the tanks started rolling in the trenches, that's gone.
Yeah, honor goes out the window.
Exactly.
Yeah, the whole and this is not a return with a V thing. Like, I don't want to go back to that necessarily, but it's I think indicative of how the sort of machine age has sort of like taken the soul out of everything, right? Mm-hmm. Anything that even had like a little bit of human, whatever the word is, it's been squeezed out of it. And it's true of, honestly, it's literally true of everything. So, I mean, I work, my day job, I'm an engineer. I work on sewer projects, right?
I thought you were a wizard.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that, a little bit of that in my spare time. But I don't do construction work myself, but I'm on construction sites all the time, and I know a lot of guys who work in construction, right? And there were time periods in my career where like I was an engineer around 20 construction workers all day long. And even that world has sort of been like, there was at some point like a little bit of, they wouldn't use the word romance. They would hate me to even say that. But there was something. It was like, we're going to go do this with our hands, and we're going to build this friggin' bridge. And it's going to like, we're part of the world here, and we're holding up our little corner of it. And now it's just like, it's just regulations, checklists. It's all like broken down to the point where like, we don't even make any decisions anymore. We just kind of show up, and we're a warm body. And I guess I move this thing from here to here. And
we barely even build those bridges and things anymore. We just try to maintain the stuff that we poorly maintain, the things that greater generations built.
Right. And
listen, guys, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to bail. I got a really early morning, but
no, fair enough, man.
Dude, this has been a great talk, Brad.
No,
I'm definitely gonna be reading your book, and I've enjoyed all the conversation tonight.
Me too.
You guys keep going. I'll watch what I miss later. But awesome. Have a good night, guys.
Yeah, pleasure, man. It's good to meet you.
See you, dude. Mm-hmm. No, I think that's the thing is, I forget. I mean, several philosophers have written books about it, of course, but the separation, and probably the most famous one was Marx, unfortunately, like the separation of man from his work in the sense of pride of it and alienation. I think that's the term we use, alienation of man from the purpose of his work. But that's a true statement. And it's when you industrialize down so much, what is like the Henry Ford method, where anyone can come in, throw a wheel on, and it keeps going the assembly line.
Right.
That destroys especially a skilled man's soul. Like you poured your life into a skill, and now it's been automated away.
Right. And this is the thing, the artistic impulse for a lot of men came out in artisan type stuff, right? In the pride in doing the work, even if that work is, there's a guy I follow on Twitter who's a carpenter, and he's a funny guy too. He's got good posts, but he'll occasionally post like stuff that he's working. Like, man, that's a beautiful piece of wood that he just turned. Like, that's incredible. And I'm sure I'm sure he's got bad days at work, but I'm sure he enjoys that a lot more than some dude who's assembling cabinets in a factory, which ultimately the end product is notionally the same thing. But like, you put the same cabinet door on the same cabinet 100 times in a day. That has no feeling or meaning to you whatsoever.
Yeah, IKEA.
Yeah. It's like, it doesn't, but you spend some time and you actually, measure things out, and you do the math and you carve the thing, and it's done when something's not quite right with it. And I'm not going to feel right until I get it exactly how I want. There's a certain sense of craftsmanship and pride that comes with all of that. That is, I think, more and more difficult to find. It's more and more difficult to find a way to make that a lucrative part of your life that can also like support you and your family. I think it's getting harder and harder to find those kinds of roles.
Oh yeah, and what I mean, again, this isn't Return because it wasn't exactly that, but what a world to think about of men and people making things they care about, and that scales up. Families making things they care about, towns making things they care about, and then you're surrounded by it, and you do get little glimpses of that, and that is something I think people do need to fight for. Don't quote me in that sense, UK police,
right?
But, cathedrals were there to remind people, hey, your granddad worked on that, your father worked on that, you work on that some, and it's always going to be there until apparently a greasy rag destroys it in 2002 somehow.
Right. Skeptical hippo on that for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, but whatever society you want to think about, the Taj Mahal, which I think was built with slave labor, but it's there. Mosques, like beautiful mosques, like the stones they use for the ceilings and all this kind of stuff. Like people, I think if you don't look at that kind of stuff, you think like the Sistine Chapel is all there is, and it's beautiful and it's amazing. But my wife and I went to an ashram in North Carolina, maybe Virginia, in Yogaville, Virginia. That's the name of it, but it's a beautiful ashram. It looks like a lotus flower, like when you see it in the distance, and you go inside, and whatever the religion, man, always.
I've been to the Blue Mosque in Istanbul, and
nice.
I have that religion is, I don't even understand that religion enough to have an opinion on it, to be honest with you. But I went in there and I was like welling up, just because you can just feel it's beautiful, and you can feel how much it's meant to people for years and years. It's just, and like you're saying, the attention and the care to make it as particular and perfect as they did, it's hard to not have some kind of emotional reaction to it.
Well, I think that's the baby out with the bathwater, is like whatever religion you want to talk about, 99% of them at least, they all prioritize beauty. And I don't know if it started with the French Revolution, but it was a big part of it. We got this idea in mind that not only is beauty subjective, but it's offensive. And like I said, I don't care really about the political implications of that or whatever, especially the modern day ones. But we live in that world. That is a reality. Is that beauty is subjective, but what that ultimately leads down to is, and I'm speaking religious terms, but kind of in the Milton sense, the satanic idea of the rejection of beauty because it's something either you can't be or you can't measure up to, or that you don't want.
the measuring up to is a big thing, because I mean, part of
Yep.
what beauty does is it calls on you to be, I mean, this is probably like a Jordan Peterson thing, but it calls on you to be better in some way.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, I think that's one of the mixes of emotions that you're feeling when you encounter something beautiful. And as an artist, it might be like, oh man, I got to make better art. But
Yeah.
even as if you're not, I think it elevates you. It calls you to elevate yourself somehow. And so when you do sort of dismiss, you're like, oh no, there's it's all relative. I'm starting to understand, I think, better the objective stance on
Yeah.
beauty and art. It's like if you just relativize it and everything's sort of on the same playing field, then you're never being called up. You're never having an expectation placed on you. You're never being sort of called out for your wretchedness. We all need to have happen to us from time to time.
No, I 100%. That is 100% what I'm saying, and maybe I should have phrased it better. And that is,
No.
I think art, when it's art, capital A, it can't help but challenge you, and I think that hurts. And that's the thing is, and that is what I think the objective nature of art is, and why as artists it's so hard. It's you don't know what it is, and like even when you make it, you're like, oh, that's great, but that's not quite it, or that's not all of it, and we'll never have all of it. And I think good art, like a good person, like when you meet a good person, like reading the Bible of Christ, or reading like Dostoevsky's The Idiot or something, when you meet a good person, it almost hurts.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I'm not that person. Or it's the same thing as in any other way. You meet like an athlete. I'll never be that guy, you know?
Right.
And we used to understand this. I know I understand it too. You kind of have to pull back and cringe a little bit when you name drop Jordan Peterson now, because of the benzos and after.
Yeah.
But that dude did open up conversations that were not in our public before.
Absolutely, 100%.
And I think he was right about it. He would use exactly what you would say, like call to adventure, and he would call you to something greater than that kind of idea. But to summarize, I do 100% think that's what art is, in whatever form it takes. The objective nature of art is that it somehow it presents a standard that you don't meet up to.
Yeah, and partially it seems like culturally what we've got going on is, I can't remember who I encountered who sort of said this first, and it kind of clicked for me. There's culturally one thing that's happening, and I suppose like politically this is sort of happening more on the generic left of things.
Yeah.
But also it's happening on the right too, but in a different form. But is this notion that we're rejecting all obligations that we did not consent to. And so, you know, in a certain sense, that's like, fewer people are having children. That would be one way to kind of think about it. But it's coming into a bunch of other things too, right? Just this idea that like, if I didn't agree to it, I shouldn't be obligated to do it. And I think the art thing comes like that too. It's like, I didn't agree to have this, myself called out, or to be drawn, to be inspired to something higher, or to like,
it's a violation.
To be judged. I didn't agree to this. And also like this fits in with the whole sort of manhood discourse. I mean, part of what I see as a man is shouldering the responsibilities, whether you chose them or not. I mean, this doesn't mean you just fight other people's battles for them stupidly, but like, you're going to have to take on stuff that you might not have wanted to take on, or it wasn't your idea. It wasn't you didn't quote unquote consent to it, but that's how life works. And so I've started seeing this sort of pattern more and more and more of this, like just shrugging off sort of anything that's an obligation that you didn't sign up for. And of course we have to pick and choose our way through which ones we're going to accept and which ones we're going to not. But like, you don't get to get out of all of them without losing some of your soul, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean that's the atomized individual is I am me, and that I know some people on the right wing argue that's the natural end result of classical liberalism, is the atomized individual, and there's some truth to that.
I think there's some truth, yeah.
but at the same time, we've seen the dangers of collectivism. That's all the last century was in Europe.
Mhm.
And so, and we addressed some of that in Napoleon a little bit, but the big thing is consent is a big idol of the modern world.
Mhm.
And I don't think we really know what consent means. It's like, to summarize it properly, just because 2 people or 3 people or 4, just because people consent to something doesn't make it right. But you
Right.
can't make a moral statement. You can't. And like I said, I'm not trying to make it a my religion. You can't make any kind of positive statement, and I say positive as in having teeth. You can't make any positive statement without pissing people off.
Mhm.
And that's the nature of humanity.
Right.
And that's just how it works. But because of that, we have this, and I hate using these terms, but I don't want to say, basically postmodern muck of everything is relative, everything's acceptable, except to say that not everything is acceptable.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm trying not to approach that from a scolding Puritan religious. I'm trying to say, like, just look at the state of ours. Like, when everything
Right.
is accepted, everything when everything is nothing.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Yeah.
nothing is then everything.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you get into the sort of the opposite. What is the nothing is true, everything is permitted. We're sort of in the everything is permitted, and so therefore nothing ends up being true kind of thing. And I think you're right. And it is weird. It is difficult. I mean, one of the wonderful things about religion is that it does give you, because here's the thing, nobody is smart or wise enough to come up with their own set of ethics and morals that are going to work. Nobody can do that. I can't, nobody. And so the one good thing about religion is it and it doesn't mean that you never doubt them, or you never have to sort of think about them, or you never encounter a situation that makes it difficult to understand what you're supposed to do. But like, it at least gives you a foothold on what the rules ought to be. And I and without it's like we kind of replaced it with nothing. Right. It would have been one thing if we would have said, okay, we're going to throw out all the old religions, and we're going to replace it with some other system. But the thing we replaced it is this weird, like, it's this weird, like, consent is somehow everything. And this isn't even about like sexual consent. Really. It's about something more than that. It's like, here's an example, not to bring it too much into AI, but like, there was just a thing where the guy who leads Anthropic was just saying that they should make that ethically they want to build a button for their LLM that says that basically allows the LLM to quit a task that
I saw you post that. Yeah.
And it's like, what the hell? Like, I don't get one of those in my life. So what? How the hell does, like, how are we going to give it to a robot? Like and part of what allows you to like mature and become wise, in my opinion, is to some degree grinding against the stuff that you don't want to do. And you got to figure out what it is you're going to do, what you're not going to do. And you got to pull wisdom from other people to come up to cobble together some degree of principles, so you have some kind of guidance through the world. And just that idea that you're gonna let I don't even know what I'm saying at this point, but I just upset me so much, and I'm still trying to understand why it upset me so much. There is this sense in which we kind of we tried to replace everything with a free-for-all, I guess is my point. And like, it's just obviously not working.
and it's also a lie, because we know it's not a free-for-all. We know there are ideas that will get you in prison, and some are rightly so. We understand that there are things that shouldn't be said and done, but we can't, like, wink wink, say where those ideas come from. And your description of religion, I think, is great. Religion is basically, it from a academic sense, a set of rules that have been tested over time and work. And that's a great place to start. It's better than, you don't do that with children. You don't leave a child in the wilderness and say, go figure out the world.
Right.
But we've
Right.
done that with our society, but we really haven't. Like,
right. Well, and then that's the thing, is there are these weird rules, but they're sort of, a lot of them seem kind of bizarre and alien, and they're a little like the stakes are sometimes seem high in the wrong places and low in the wrong places, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah,
people are committing career suicide by something that they said online, but like you can have on the other hand, if you have some like rapacious drug problem, like that's okay.
Well, there's a term for that if I were more bitter, I would use not unironically, and I forget that it's not stochastic terrorism. What is it? It's like I think it's anarchic terrorism.
Anarcho-terrorism, yeah.
Anarcho-terrorism. That's it. Yeah.
Or anarcho-tyranny, I think.
That's it. Anarcho-tyranny. Yeah, where the rules are enforced wrongly, basically. I mean, I'm not going to go down that whole rabbit hole.
Right,
People who know
right.
it they can research it if they want. I'm not going to point people in certain directions I don't consciously agree with.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah.
You dropped Nick Land earlier. That's a whole rabbit hole too.
Hey, I'm not even like a big Nick
Yeah.
Land. I don't even understand him for the most part.
He doesn't understand
honestly.
himself.
Yeah. So it isn't like, but I do think there's a couple of predictive things that he said about what could happen that I think he was actually right. And so it's not.
I love the CCRU stuff just as an art project.
Oh,
Like,
yeah,
I love
it's
that. I love that kind of stuff. Anything that combines the esoteric with fiction and history. I love to nerd out. I love to nerd out on that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But no, we basically we have morals, but we won't say where they come from.
Right.
We have ideas, but we don't know where they come from. And so, I mean, ultimately, I think my belief is that man wants to be God. I think that's what a lie is. I think a lie is you trying to change reality, at least in someone else's mind. And I wrote about that in some of the peripheral work of Apollyon, and that's what our work is. Our entire universe is based on, is that AI and man merge in this one figure, and he becomes God, basically, for all intents and purposes. And the whole kind of great thesis of the work, whenever it's done, is that man can't be God, no matter what you think. It's just, there's something, whether you call it sin, whatever you call it, flaw, evolutionary flaw, there's something in us that we can't do it.
Yeah,
you're going to end up making hell on earth.
Yeah, well, that's definitely true, right? I mean, that's one of the interesting things that you sort of this is one of the, I was kind of talk early on about sort of my demystification and remystification process, right? So as I said, like raised Catholic, and then I had like a Reddit atheist Richard Dawkins sort of phase in my, say, late teens, early 20s, and then through a variety of experiences have come out being whatever it is I am now, which is definitely not a Reddit atheist, but also I don't really know what words to put on it exactly. But the one thing you sort of like, one thing kind of coming out of that process for me, well, frankly, Jordan Peterson was not a non-entity in that whole process. But the one thing you kind of, I think part of my rejection of all of the religious stuff early on was something, I thought these rules were sort of arbitrary. And I'd sort of been convinced by the world that they were arbitrary. And then sort of my sort of remystification process was actually realizing that they were, a lot of them at least, were profoundly true and just told to me in simple terms, like you might tell to a child, right? Like, that lying, that it wasn't that you didn't lie because lying was wrong. It is, you shouldn't lie, right? But it's not just because there's an arbitrary rule about it. It's because if you lie enough, you'll make your life hell. And that's why you don't do violence onto people. It is wrong, but it's also, if you do it, you'll make your own life and you'll make the world around you hell. Right. And so understanding that these things were deep observations about humankind and reality, folded and packaged and evolved over time to be transmitted in the simplest possible way.
Yeah.
And now it's just sort of like, oh, is Sky Daddy gonna get mad at you? And it's like, well,
He might.
I mean, he might. I mean, it's like, you can't even really contend with that kind of like. One of my favorite Twitter accounts is like something. What is it? It's basically, it posts like cringy atheist memes.
Oh yeah.
And it's not agreeing with them. It's like showing you how stupid they are. So you see those kind of things, and you're just like, there, you guys aren't even like, you get there may be criticisms of the thing you're trying to criticize, but you're not even over the target. Like, you don't even know, you're nowhere near it. You don't have any idea what you're talking about or what you're even flinging arrows at.
Yeah. I mean, I like to laugh at cringy atheists as well.
Sure.
It's fun. I had this experience. I was raised a Protestant, and my father was a Pentecostal minister, but not in the way that sounds. Basically, that was the main denomination where we lived. Like, that's how you became a pastor. He strongly advocated for go read, go think. Him and my mother were both educators, and great ones and brilliant ones. And if I had to say, if I met anyone who embodied Christ, it would be the two of them.
Oh wow.
He's passed now. She's still alive. But all that to say, raised Pentecostal, but not really in the Pentecostal church. But met some Baptist friends as I got older, and that was strange. That one I will like kind of laugh at. All that to say, I'm not trying to turn this into a preaching moment, but I encountered Christ at 22, and I realized I had encountered the divine. Everything about me changed, and I realized how awful I was. And there's a whole thing there. We can, and I'd love to have you on to go like a deep dive and just experiences, like weird things we've seen and seen later. Sure. All that to say, I had confirmations and like things that made reality align with the divine. But I'm 38 now. I've had 2 kids. I got a wife, and we had 5 years of loss. Well, I lost my brother, I lost my dad. She lost 3 cousins that were all brothers. She lost her grandmother, lost someone else. A lot of people in like a 5-year span.
Yeah.
And it is. And last year, I actually it was last year. I was working downtown in the town I work in, and there's a beautiful old Catholic church I just happened to pass. It's been there since 1850. It's one of the oldest ones, I think, on the Eastern Seaboard. I was like, oh, you can just walk in, right? That's what they do in movies. Like,
yeah.
So I was on a lunch break at a park, and I walked in. I was like, I can't believe you can just walk in. Like going to a Baptist church, they'll shoot you if you just walk in.
Right.
But the second I walked through the door, I was smacked in the face with incense, and it was awesome. And I walked through the second door. There's like a foyer, and I walked to the second door. And for some reason that day, the lights were out, and it was just the candles at the front. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know which way you're supposed to cross yourself. I know the Orthodox do it. All that to say, I violated probably a lot of rules, but I walked in and sat down, and I had like an hour to kill, and I pulled out. They had a little book in front, and I read it, and I was like, oh, it's like the sermon of the week or whatever, like the litany,
a homily.
Yeah. See, that's how ignorant I am with the Catholic Church.
That's all right.
read it all, and I was like, "Oh, this isn't so bad. It's pretty short. Maybe the standing and sitting down makes it longer." And but I sat there, and I'm gonna say this: like 38 years of Protestantism didn't leave me, but it got rocked to the foundational core.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Because the images, the wood carvings, it all made sense instantly. I was like, these are images to be venerated. These are sacred things. Mary made sense. John made sense. There's Christ in the middle. And like everything, I never had anything against Catholicism, but you always like, especially like the veneration of Mary is strange for Protestants.
Sure.
But everything, like literally everything, almost an entire religion made sense in my head. And overwhelming sense of awe, and I was like, man, like this is important. And the biggest thing, the number one thing that struck me was how quiet it was. And I was like, this is sacred.
Yeah.
And I'm not preaching one religion over the other, because I understand, like, you've been to a mosque, I've been to an ashram, but there's that sense there.
Oh yeah,
That,
man. And
yeah.
this is the thing. Like, I still occasionally, if I'm in a place where there's a notable Catholic church, right? Like this one you're talking about, or there's an amazing the St. Paul's Church in St. Paul, Minnesota is unbelievably beautiful. And I've been to Rome, and I go into these places and I feel something I can't rationalize away.
Yeah.
Honestly, the Catholic, and it's not so much anymore, because I grew up in a Catholic church that was drywall for the most part,
Yeah.
and it didn't really have much of anything aesthetically.
That's all the churches I did.
Yeah. And not like a lot of art on the wall, and there wasn't really much of it at all, but yeah, I absolutely feel the Catholics. I went to Peru last year, and there are some Catholic churches down in Peru that will just, oh my, they'll bring you to your knees.
Yeah.
Their interpretation of things, not religiously, but just aesthetically, is just a little different. And they have even more of when they were building those, they seem to have even more of a penchant for detail. And so the detail is like almost overwhelming. It like takes over your sensory experience. And it took me some time to recover from that, to be honest.
Well, no, and I think that's an astute observation that just kind of hit me while we were talking. Is everyone knows kind of the meme now of the biblically accurate angels,
right? Yeah.
And of course, I think there's only 2 descriptions of that in the Bible, and the rest of it are humans. But the question is, why are they covered in eyes? And that's the thing. Maybe that's what you need to witness divinity.
Is that some of the eyes you need?
Yeah. I think about that kind of stuff. And I meant to say this earlier when Josh was here, but the destruction of the sacred we were talking about is I wanted to give credence to the Catholic Church. They were good at finding the rural or the native religion and incorporating it into their religion, and making sure that the people that they were witnessing to and converting didn't lose 100% of what they had of their sacred establishment, Oh, I think I lost you. Well, I think we lost Brad. Let me talk with him real quick. Let me pull it up on Twitter. Yep, he may have lost internet connection. Let's give him just a few minutes. Look at the chat. I don't think there's anything super. Oh, he said he had a power outage. All right. I'll wrap it up there, guys. Thanks for coming in. That was a really great talk. I'm going to have him back on hopefully pretty soon. Thanks for stopping by, guys.